One of the best ways to generate leads is by identifying your scope of influence or your sphere of influence. Now, you hear a lot about this. You just have to go out and generate referrals. Well, what exactly is a referral? Well, a referral simply could be if real estate comes up in a conversation. If somebody's interested in either buying or selling real estate, there's going to be a transaction. And no matter what happens inside that transaction, you at least want to be part of that conversation. So how do you get your arms around your sphere of influence or scope of influence? Well, oftentimes people will just take a look and say, well, these are my advocates, my A's, my friends, my family, the people who would take a bullet for me and refer me at any time, any place, because they really truly are my advocates. And oftentimes they just look at that and say, well, that's my scope of influence. But your scope of influence goes way beyond that. It actually goes to your B's, your business associates, the people who know what your business actually is. They relate to you as being in the real estate industry. Then there's your C's. It's just simply your community. Maybe it's people that you've seen when you're picking up your children at school or in the community. Whatever you might be involved in, maybe it's hobbies or clubs or other people inside your community where you haven't really necessarily had a business conversation, but they somehow can be identified. Maybe they're in your cellular phone. Maybe they're in your contact records. Whatever that may be, you want to start getting your arms around that as well. And then finally, they're your D's. D's are like, I have no idea how this person even got on my list, but somehow I had some kind of interaction with them. So your A's are your advocates, your B's are the people who know you in business, you've had a business related conversation, or people at least know what it is that you do for your business. Your C's are your community. Then your D's are just people that are in your contacts somehow. So then how do you get your arms again around all of this? Well, dump your contacts. Now, how do you do that? Well, depending on the type of phone that you use, if you're using potentially an Android or maybe you're using an iPhone, they all have the ability to export contacts. And so I would highly recommend that you use maybe Google Sheets or maybe it's Excel, and you just export all of your contact information. At the very least, a name, an email address, and a phone number. If you have any other information, that's great, but essential really is going to be a name, an email address, and a phone number. Now, if you have a name and a phone number, that's fine, or a name and an email address, that's great too, but you want to get them all onto a sheet. So dump your phone. Take a look at every email that you've sent. Well, how do you do that? Well, if you happen to be on the Google platform, it just so happens that Google will take all of the contacts, the actual email addresses, which it oftentimes will populate names then as well because it's associated with the account, and you simply can just go into the contacts icon and you'll see all of those contacts in there. Again, just export those contacts. Take a look at any directories that you have. Maybe they're school, maybe they're PTA, maybe they're hobby groups, whatever that may be. Get those directories, that information all into your sheet, and again then classify them, your A's, your B's, your C's, and your D's. Now you have all of this information, then it's time to start thinking about how do I communicate with them appropriately, right? So your A's, they're the ones that are going to refer you. It's just really maintaining that conversation, making sure that you're top of mind. Say, hey, has real estate come up in a conversation lately? And man, if so, man, I really appreciate you, putting my name out there like you have before. But your B's, you have to nurture them in a way where you can really get them in a position to be listening for when real estate does come up in a conversation. And when it does, then they have a trigger to say, oh, wow, you know what? I need to call this person, right? I need you to, or I need them to be able to call. And so how do you do that? Well, again, it's just the trigger. If real estate comes up in a conversation, just like that, right? If real estate comes up in a conversation, and when they tie that trigger with, oh, wow, real estate came up in a conversation, you know what? I need to call you, or I need to share your contact information or share their contact information or pull out my cell phone. And that's why it's very important that you have a contact card in your cellular phone that you then can text to that person and say, hey, if real estate comes up in a conversation, would you feel comfortable referring me? Would you feel comfortable sharing the contact information, my contact information either with them or their contact information with me? And just having those conversations and then making sure that they have a very easy way to contact you. And then with your C's, same thing, get them to the point to where they can become B's. Have a business-related conversation with them, not changing them around or chasing them around or having conversations that are just unnatural or awkward. It's just as business-related conversations come up in a regular community conversation, that typically is something like, well, hey, so what do you do? Or, hey, tell me about what you do. Be genuinely interested in the other person. Start bridging that conversation naturally into a business-related conversation. And then ultimately your C's then become your B's. And then your D's, you just kind of got to figure out where they came from. And so oftentimes the best way to do that is to simply just send an email to them and just say, hey, I was thinking about you. How are you doing, right? See what kind of response you get because you were thinking about them. You were thinking very hard, where did this person come from? And you'd be surprised then when you get that email back, which would be, who are you? I don't know what you're talking about. Or, oh, wow, yeah, I'm your long-lost high school person that you had met. So whatever that may be, you then can start filtering down the D's. You can get them off your list, or you can start converting and having those conversations to C's. So it's one of the very best ways that you can start getting referrals, start building your business, is then having appropriate conversations after you've segmented your database. So get your arms around your database, segment them, start having those conversations, and ultimately you'll start seeing additional business come in simply from your sphere of influence.